moved to a new country and I felt the pressure to fit in. May I see a quick show of hands? Okay, well that's a lot of hands. So please keep that feeling in mind because that's where the talk begins. You see, when we talk about integration, we often talk about what we can see and what we can measure. We look at how fluent somebody is in the target language, how many local friends they have got in their social circle, what kind of job they have landed, and whether they have bought a home in a new country they now call home. In other words, we focus on the surface. What we rarely talk about is what's happening underneath, especially for those who seem to be doing everything right. Many migrants grew up wanting to become what I call a good migrant. A good migrant works hard, a good migrant is grateful, a good migrant adapts quickly, and a good migrant laughs at jokes they don't fully understand. So on paper, a good migrant often looks like a success story, and I learned that role early. My name is Anita. I'm Taiwanese Australian. I've lived half of my life in Taiwan and the other half in Australia before moving to the Netherlands 2.5 years ago. When I was a teenager living in Australia, I did everything in my power to assimilate through my choice of clothing, through who I spend time with, through working on my English, and through sticking to all the rules in Australia. And believe me, for a country that prides itself on being laid back, there are so many rules. And I remember there were times when I was walking down the street with my mom, and she'd speak to me in Mandarin, and I replied to her in English. Now, not because she needed me to, but because I didn't want strangers to hear me speaking Mandarin. Now, on the surface, that looked like integration, but underneath the surface, it was shame. Shame of where I came from, directly at my own mother, who is now standing next to me. And that's a hidden cost, one that doesn't show up in any measure of successful integration. I was performing a good migrant, and I was paying for it with the one relationship that always felt like home. Except, I didn't see it that way then. If anything, I thought the answer was to go even further, to sound a little more Australian, to act a little more Australian, and then to need a little less of where I came from. And on paper, it paid off, because by the time I finished my teaching degree, I landed a job as an English teacher at one of the best schools in Melbourne, Australia. The only Asian, non-native English-speaking English teacher on a teaching team of 20, where my colleagues were predominantly white Australians. So I was there teaching English literature and academic English to both native English-speaking and non-native English-speaking students. And I didn't take the job to prove anything. I took it because I simply loved teaching, and then I loved the language. But I was also aware of what it represented at that time. At the time when many migrants I knew were still wrestling with the language, were still trying to find their footing, and I was being paid to teach it, and then to teach in it. So you can just imagine what an achievement that felt like for me. And I was all of a sudden held up as a success story and then being invited to speak with international students and migrant professionals. So on paper, I had never looked more like a good migrant, and I thought to myself, this is it. I finally made it. And I couldn't have been more wrong. Because in the first couple of months of my new job, I felt miserable. Now, my imposter syndrome and my good migrant performance intensified. Because now I wasn't just trying to fit in, I was trying to justify being there at all. So I stopped majoring my teaching, and then I started majoring my grammar, vocabulary, my accent, and then my ability to be effortlessly and naturally funny in a staff room conversation against my colleagues. So basically people who were born into the language. And that did not end well for me. Because you see, the first couple of months of my job, I really struggled with this one thing. It wasn't lesson planning, it wasn't marking, it wasn't even dealing with occasionally rebellious teenagers. It was every Wednesday afternoon when we had a team meeting, when the 20 of us, we all sit down around this big round table, and everybody had so much to say, and so did I, except I was almost always the one who said the least. And it wasn't because I didn't have anything to say, it wasn't because the conversations, the discussions didn't concern me, it was because I was afraid of being found out. I was worried if I stumbled, if I made just this one tiny mistake, and my colleagues would think, she shouldn't be here. And that fear paralyzed me for a long time. And that's another hidden cost that a lot of people don't see. The good migrant works hard to get in the door, but she works just twice as hard to convince herself that she deserves to stay. And here's what years of that performance eventually did. I barely spoke a word of Mandarin outside of conversation with my own family. I was so focused on creating this ideal version of myself that I believed would finally fit, that I slowly erased this other version of me that already existed. And the good migrant was performing so well after all. And yet, after all that, I didn't feel Australian enough to call myself Australian. And I didn't feel Taiwanese enough either. So I was now officially stuck in both worlds and belonged to neither. And it's a soul-wrenching feeling not knowing where you belong. And I knew I couldn't go on like this anymore. I knew something had to change. Because I didn't want the good migrant performance to cost me the very life that I built and loved. And I can't pinpoint exactly when things began to change. It wasn't like I received a single breakthrough. It was more like a slow return of a voice that I had been turning down for many years. And it started small. So I started speaking Mandarin a little bit more, and I started posting things online in Mandarin a little bit more. And I even started ordering food at my favorite Taiwanese restaurants in Mandarin without feeling self-conscious. Now, these things might sound trivial, but for me, they were actually quite radical. After years of concealing this part of myself, just to simplify my story, and I was now finally letting both sides of me coexist in the same space. And that carried into work too. Because I realized something that sounds simple, but took me a long time to finally understand. I was never like my colleagues. I was never one of them. And at the same time, I was one of them. Because underneath all of it, the different backgrounds and ethnicity, we loved the same thing. The language, the classroom, that was all real. And once I was finally able to make peace with what made me different, I was finally able to show up for things that made us the same. And here's what I learned. It was never about picking a side. It was never ever about molding myself into a box. I am my own box. I am my own weirdly shaped, unique, and beautifully confusing box. And I liked it. and I didn't have to simplify my story just to make it easier for others to comprehend. And out of that realization, something unexpected grew. So by 2021, I had done so much work on myself that I was now I wanted to offer the same to others. So I started a coaching practice to help other migrant professionals integrate and thrive in English-speaking workplaces with confidence. And I realized something quite early on. So when I was helping others, I was helping myself too. And there was something quite full circle about being able to guide others through the very things that I once struggled with. And as it turns out, underneath the surface, we all carry the same unspoken weight. But once we bring it up to the surface, to see it and name it and share it, and then to do something about it, then that's when shame transforms. It stops feeling like a personal failure, and it starts feeling like a shared humanity. And I wonder what would change for all of us if today we started asking not just, how did you do that? But also, what did you have to leave behind to get you to where you are today? If we all started looking beneath the surface. And if there's one last thing I could leave you with today, it would be this. Learn the cultural rules of your new country, but hold on to the ones that you brought with you. They are not inferior, they're just different. Work on your communication, but do it because you want to, not because you believe your voice needs fixing. Adapt, but check in with yourself along the way. Is this me adapting, or is this me disappearing? Because the moment you are able to tell the difference, that's when everything changes. My name is Anita. I'm Taiwanese and Australian. 我是 Anita. 我是台湾人，也是澳洲人. I'm now beginning the third chapter of my life here in the Netherlands, and very soon the fourth. I'm more than one thing, and for the first time in a long time, that feels like enough. Thank you.